Welcome to Compass Stories. I'm your host, Veronica Sterling. And my work is centered on helping people who are in the middle of disruption rediscover meaning, strengthen connection, and move forward with courage. I do this through speaking, sharing experiences, and storytelling. I'm grateful that you've joined me for a conversation today. And if it resonates with you, I hope that you will share it with someone else in your life. Thanks for being here. Have you ever noticed that when we are in the throes of a difficult situation or just trying to figure something out, to build something, to resolve something, we get ourselves in that messy middle of our life experience, and it's a point when we need support the most, we need connection with others the most, and yet for some reason we feel compelled to draw ourselves inward and avoid that opportunity for connection. Why is it? Why do we do that? Today, that's something that I'm going to be talking about with my guest. It is Amy Scalia. She is a wonderful woman. She's a Cincinnati-based entrepreneur. She's a founder of Local Creator Studio and the co-founder of PS Never Give Up. Amy has built her work around storytelling, not just as a creative tool, but as a way to help people feel seen, connected, and less alone when they are in the messy middle of their own experience. In this conversation, Amy opens up and shares what it feels like to live through heartache without losing hope. She's also going to talk to us about how hope can help build our life into something bigger than we've ever expected. This was a great conversation. I've enjoyed every conversation I've been able to have with Amy, and I'm just really grateful that she joined me for an episode here. And I'm glad you've tuned in to listen. Oh, I am glad you're here. Why don't you introduce your story to us today? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Gosh, where to start? So I grew up in Cincinnati, and my grandma was one of the first female newspaper reporters in Ohio. And she always had really cool stories and was a great storyteller. And I just was very inspired by her. And I knew that I wanted to do something along those lines. I just really connected with that. So I went to college, Miami University, and went to communications. It was the first year that they were offering electronic journalism, is what they were calling it. Now everything's digital, but at the time they called it electronic journalism. So I thought that I was going to be a newspaper reporter like grandma, but I had a great professor who was like, media is going to look really different even by the time you graduate here, and painted the picture of what has happened with media and information about how everything kind of lives in this cloud, and that you view it on whatever screen is convenient to you at the time, and you pull from that same information cloud. And so you really want to future-proof your communications degree and career with the knowledge base that supports that. So I was the first year that they offered this new track where it was learning not only for journalism, but also graphic design, web streaming audio, video, and video editing, and it was the first year that they offered it. And so I graduated with this really cool, new, fancy degree, and there were no jobs for it at the time. And I grew up in Cincinnati, went to school pretty close to Cincinnati, and the only jobs that I was finding was very far away from Cincinnati. And so I found a publishing job in Philadelphia and packed up a U-Haul, sight unseen, was interviewed, got the job over the phone, huge adventure, pretty cool. So I worked for a publishing company up there, a healthcare trade publishing company, for a couple of years, launched their first online-only publication, and it was this publishing house that had about 30 print publications. But I got really homesick for Cincinnati. I missed my network. I missed my friends. I missed who I am now married to. We had met right before I moved up there. So on those long drives back and forth from Philadelphia to Cincinnati, I was thinking, what's going to get me back? Because again, there were no jobs still. So I decided, since I started an online publication for someone else, that I could do it for myself. So I started Cincinnati's first online-only publication for women. It's called Cincy Chic. And I grew it over 13 years to have over 30,000 opt-in subscribers. I started a sister publication in Columbus called C-Bus Chic. I have a real passion for supporting women, and this allowed me to be able to do that, and also to really elevate Cincinnati and Columbus, because they're these great middle-sized markets that have enough to talk about and amazing women to elevate and bring together, but no one really providing resources for that. So I did that over 13 years, running the publication, having events. I got an offer to purchase it right before COVID, so the timing ended up being perfect. And so after I sold it, I worked for a local TV station and launched a lifestyle show for them. But I think once an entrepreneur, always an entrepreneur. And I came to the realization that media had, again, really, really changed, even outside of digital journalism. And now, instead of media holding the keys to the people, it was really the people that are doing the cool things. They can create their own channel, their own network, their own audience, and they don't have to wait for media to unlock that anymore. But the challenge is that people have they don't know how to tell their own story. They need help doing that effectively. Because usually people are really good at doing the thing that they love doing, but they don't have the mental bandwidth to be able to say, like, okay, how does this look to someone who's not in it? And like, how do I explain what I do to someone who doesn't do it every single day? And how do I connect with that person and share that what's in it for them? So I help with storytelling. I help with what that looks like in terms of branding or connecting, how to find that audience.
I think one of the things that I like the most when I see what you're sharing online is okay, you can definitely go online and scroll through social media and see these perfect outcomes of everyone just optimized and achieving whatever the dream is. But you really prioritize the messy middle. And you said to me once that you think that's really where the inspiration is for other people. So tell me, how do you do that? How do you decide to put your messy middle out there for thousands of people to see?
Well, as a recovering perfectionist, it's a challenge every day, but I think you kind of get to a point where you're just like, I can't be perfect. That's not me. And also, I know I connect with people who are sharing their figure it out moments of like, here I am, here's where I want to go. I'm going to take you with me. And that feels like a friend. And I think that that's really, like I shared with you, that's where the magic is, where you make real human connections. I think I dipped my toe into the water in terms of like sharing a messy middle, when we were in the middle of our fertility battle. And, that's a whole nother can of worms we can open whenever you're ready. But my husband kind of shared our story because he wanted to kind of explain some things that were happening with him. And by him sharing his story with fertility, it was also sharing mine. And it felt so I felt so exposed, because it wasn't something I had figured out yet. It was something that was so ingrained in me that this is something that, I felt like defective, or like I hadn't accomplished my goal. Like I'm so used to work really hard, accomplish the goal. And this was something that I was working really hard and I wasn't able to accomplish the goal. And it just felt very raw. But so many people came out of the woodwork when we shared that we were in the middle of fertility issues. And other people are like, me too. Oh my gosh, I feel so alone. Not talked about. And this was 12 years ago. So it was
Yeah.
long before I feel like a lot more people feel more comfortable talking about it. I'm so happy about that. But when I was talking about it, it just felt very scary. Um, but in that, I realized that I made so many amazing connections, and they were true, deep connections with people that I had never met. I had no idea that there was this amount of people out there that were dealing with the same thing that I was. And one of the biggest issues that I had was that I felt so alone in it, that I felt like I was the only one that was dealing with these issues. And I felt the real power of the messy middle. And I'm like, I know I'm not alone. And it makes other
Yeah.
people feel good. It makes me feel good when I realize that I'm not alone.
Let's back up a little bit because you said that you dipped your toes into sharing
Uh-huh,
the messy
uh-huh,
middle when you
uh-huh,
started sharing your infertility journey. But
uh-huh,
I know that story. And when you shared it, you were on bed rest.
uh-huh,
You said you felt broken, you felt
uh-huh,
isolated,
uh-huh,
and I don't think that we can say that you dipped your toes in this because you were in the deep end of
uh-huh.
vulnerability when you decided to share how
Uh-huh.
you were feeling and what you were experiencing. And I just can't imagine how much strength it took to do that. But yeah, do you want to talk
Yeah,
about what
sure.
led to that moment?
So my husband has severe rheumatoid arthritis, and he had been on biologic drugs to, like, when I met him, he was fine. Like, he was lead singer in a band, like hanging from the rafters, like you'd never know that this man has what quote unquote old lady's disease, and because he was taking a drug that worked really well for him. And the way that these drugs work, because it's an immune disease, what the drugs do is it makes you sick enough to, like with rheumatoid arthritis, the fluid in your joint, all of a sudden one day it wakes up and it's like cartilage is bad, got to get rid of it, and they don't know what causes it. So he experienced that, and he's taking drugs to basically calm the fluid down and make it like lazy enough to be like, cartilage is okay, I'm just going to deal with it, but strong enough to be able to fight off the common cold. So it makes you sick enough to be like lazy to not eat all the cartilage in your body, well enough to be able to fight off the common cold. Works great for RA. A lot of side effects for tons of things, including fertility. So you cannot be on, because a lot of these drugs start as cancer medications. And so he's on this drug, has to get off of it if we want to start a family. So, and you have to be off of it for a really long time to make sure it's completely cleared out of your system. So he had been off of it for, I think it was 6 months, and then we were allowed to start trying. It doesn't happen as fast as you can, like the watch pot never boils. And so he had been off his medicines for over a year. We had a miscarriage, which ended up like resetting the clock for us fertility wise, because they see that as you are able to get pregnant. So now you have to go a whole year of not being able to get pregnant at that time, to be able to start fertility treatment. So then that like restarted the clock. So we're going on like a couple years of him not on the RA meds that help his body from eating all the cartilage in it. And in the meantime, he's on a steroid. And if anyone's ever taken a steroid for a prolonged amount of time, first off, it makes you very hungry all the time. And you also don't sleep really well. You get this moon pie face. And my husband's job is he's on TV. And so he is, all of a sudden, he goes from like this Italian stallion, like good looking, trim guy. All of a sudden, he's got the moon pie face. All the trolls are coming out online going like, don't let Pete near the food. Geez, what happened to him? And he's just like, every day somebody's saying something. And the longer you go, the worse it gets. And so he's like, Amy, I just feel like we need to be transparent about what's happening. Like the trolls are going to troll and they're going to make up their own story regardless. I feel like I need to tell them the real story because they're going to otherwise make up their own and it's not true. And he's like, I know I'm not the only one dealing with arthritis and chronic illness. There's a lot of people out there. And I feel like I'm put into the public eye to be able to maybe be a face of what they don't necessarily associate with arthritis. And so I'm like, oh, that's really scary. I get what you're saying, and so he goes online and he shares the story where it's like, hey, you might have noticed over the past several months, my appearance has changed and this is why. And he shared all of that. My gosh, he got all these letters and people saying, thank
Mm.
you for sharing your story, this invisible disease, you are shedding light on this. And other people shared, that maybe they're a young guy with rheumatoid. Thank you for sharing this. Like everyone misunderstands it. And so he just like had this immediate community of support and the trolls went away and it just like made things so much better when he shared his story. And I realized at the time I was running a women's publication, 30,000 subscribers, and 1 in 8 has some sort of fertility
Mm.
issue. And I'm thinking, I am doing my audience a disservice by not talking about what I'm going through. And it felt really scary because we had the miscarriage. We had gone through IVF. We were pregnant at the time. Uh, but I had just started bleeding again and I was put on bed rest. And it felt very scary to share from that place because day to day, I didn't know if this pregnancy was going to succeed. But I decided that I would write. Oh my gosh, I'm going to cry. I decided that I was going to write this column to be able to share my side of the story because, of course, a lot of people online saw Pete's and they were like, what's going on with Amy? And so I shared my perspective and it was from the middle. And I shared everything from the loss that we had to being scared, but hopeful and being able to hold both at the same time. It was so beautiful because so many people came out in support and shared their story. And it honestly was really helpful because I learned a lot of resources from that helped with the other two pregnancy. I read this book about fertility foods that was like life-changing. And it just was so powerful that this community around me just lifted me up. I feel like I was able to lift others up. And it was just this magical moment where
Mm.
it truly changed my life, sharing from this really scary place of not having everything figured out and being scared but hopeful at the same time. And I think that is a lesson to be learned about anything that you're going through. You aren't alone. You don't have to be alone. There's no award for getting through a difficult time alone. And one of the beautiful things that we can tap into with social media, there's a lot of ugly things about social media, but there's a beauty when you share and you're so easily able to access people who love and care about you. And even people who you don't know, you are able to connect with. And there's a real beauty in that.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Amy. Yeah. Tell me, how do you choose hope?
Mm.
You do it all the time.
Yeah. Well, I think that I've always believed. My mom used to say, worrying is like a rocking chair. It gives you something to do, but it doesn't get you anywhere. And for some reason, that
That's
silly
good. I'm
little
going to write
thing
that.
that just stuck with me because with anything that happens, you have the choice on the perspective that you can't change what's happening, but how you look at it is in your power to change, like your perspective on it. And also, I feel like there's a real power in hope to be able to get you through because when you focus on that and you visualize best case scenario, it helps you continue to take steps toward it versus when you're thinking like, okay, I'm in this dark tunnel and whether I'm like going the right way or the wrong way, but when you visualize the hopeful, you visualize yourself getting closer and closer to it. And I think that when you have the choice to think like, okay, am I going towards the light end of the tunnel or the dark end? When you are like visualizing the light and going toward that, you are going towards that. It's a much better choice than choosing dark just because it might happen. I just think that hope when you have the choice between hope and hopeless, always choose hope, because until it's over, it's not over. And just there's something that can be found that's hopeful, even some of the darkest times. There's something to be able to take away from it. And I just think that we have this saying in our family, never give up. And I see hope as that, and not giving up, and always having some sort of hope, and it gets you through the big things, the small things, the in-between things.
Before we got on this call today, I was working on a program that I'm giving to a group of women next month in Tennessee. And they asked me if I would talk about grief. And the woman who's playing the event said, I'd like to talk about grief because I don't think grief is just about death. I think there's grief that happens throughout our life. And how do we navigate that? You're giving me notes because I've been working on this message to say, well, there is grief. It happens all throughout our life. You were experiencing grief as a young wife, caregiver. Idea of what you had envisioned for your future was changing. But I'm sharing with them too that I think that we should make more space, or maybe be more forgiving of ourselves to allow grief and joy to live alongside each other.
Yeah.
Having joy isn't a betrayal to grief. Having grief means that we are in love with something, with someone, right? I mean, that all goes together. So tell me, so you've gone through heartache, but now you have 3 children. You have all that work. So tell me about being a mom. Tell me about being a mom. Tell me this season of your life.
Oh gosh. Well, I think that it's one of my greatest joys, but you're talking about grief before that. And I really see that the grief, I did grieve the life that I thought. I think the grief is like love that of something that you had or thought you had. And it's like something that you haven't figured out, like something like you have, but you haven't found like a shelf to put it on, or, it's just sort of floating, and you kind of hold it until you have a place for it. And I held that grief for so long because, again, I had this idea of newlyweds, we're going to travel, we're going to do this and that. And then when we decide to have kids, boom, family time. And it just didn't work out that way. And I held a lot of grief for who my husband was, and the transition to who he is now. And again, I held that until I was able to put that on a shelf and say, like, this is who he is now. And there's differences with that. Like, yes, I will not have a running partner in my husband. That's okay. But I did grieve that a little bit. But I replaced it with a lot of joy, because I spent a lot of time focusing on that joy and the hope of, like, okay, I hope he can regain his strength. And then when I have that, and I really focus on that as, like, that's something to truly be joyful. When I see that, I am going to sit with it for a little bit, because I didn't think that would be possible. There was a day I remember sitting in a bathtub, just like we had gone through the loss, like I was dealing with just all of this that I just was, I call it my bathtub moment, because I just felt so lost, and like I just was, I wanted so bad, and I had to have the miscarriage, to realize that I wanted to be a mom so bad. Pete is about 10 years older than me, and he was a lot more ready to have kids than me. And so I focused, I thought about that whole situation, and I thought, I'm actually, in a weird way, I know that had to happen that way. I am a different mom because of that loss. If that loss hadn't have happened, I wouldn't have had that bathtub moment where I just realized that I so viscerally wanted to be a mom. I wanted it more than
Mm.
anything. And I did not fully feel that before the loss.
Oh.
And so I think that when you have that grief, and again, it's not always a bad thing, like figure out, okay, this is the thing I'm holding, and how do I get to that other side? How do I find a perfect spot for it? And sometimes you take it off that shelf again and you hold it again. Maybe that's not the perfect spot for it anymore. And so, I think back to those moments of grief and sorrow, and I actually am thankful for it, because when the kids are acting up or they're being crazy, and moments that would like send me over the edge otherwise, I think like I prayed for this. I had my bathtub moment for this. Oh my gosh, I still wanted this. I asked for it. I prayed for it. Now it's here, And so I think that I am a completely different mom now. And probably we have more kids than I ever would have like thought I would ever want because of that. And but it just it's one of my greatest joys, and I hate to say like accomplishments, but because of we didn't give up on wanting that for us, and we knew that that was for us, and we figured out a way to make that happen. And actually through advancements through biologics, and one of the reasons we're really involved with like the Arthritis Foundation, because of the research that happened after those years that we were off medicine. We went through IVF for Lola, our oldest, but there was a new medication that did not have side effects for fertility that he went on. So he was able to make his body feel better, and we didn't have to worry about side effects. And so we actually naturally had number 2 and number 3. And so that's pretty exciting. I also attribute that to the Fertility Foods book, and just naturally, what ways other than medicate this and medicate that, like what can you do naturally? And part of that was a healthy life, healthy diet, healthy mind, and it all plays into it. But yes, I'm a mom of 3, and I mean 4 if you count Pete, my husband, 5 if you count the dog. But it's pretty crazy. But I had my bathtub moment praying for it, so now it's here.
So one of the things that I talk to people about is expanding our capacity.
Mm-hmm.
And you touched on one of the ways that I think capacity expands, and it's when we find our community, right? And we can start to realize that we're not isolated, that stigma can shrink and disappear because other people are there talking about the thing with us. I also think that we can expand our capacity by making time to care for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I know in my life have struggled sometimes to make sure that I'm caring for myself, not just caring for other people. And I feel like I have seen in you this example of a devotion to self, and not in a way that is selfish at all. It seems that you're finding ways to fill your cup and care for yourself. And what do they say? You can't fill another's cup if yours is yours is empty.
Can't pour from an empty cup.
What are some things that you do to have that devotion and that care for yourself in a way that it expands your capacity for others?
Well, being married to someone who is differently abled has been a real eye-opener. Growing up, I never was close, never really had anyone in my circle that had different abilities. And, we try to not say handicapped, but, like that has issues with everyday things, opening a jar, sometimes just getting out of bed. And it was a real eye-opener to me, because like I said, when I met my husband, everything was fine. Like he told me that he has rheumatoid arthritis, but I'm like, okay, well, you act and like everything seems fine. It sounds like you have it under control. I've heard of arthritis before. It's not like some strange disease that I've never heard of before and can't wrap my head around. I'm like, okay, sometimes your joints hurt, but clearly it's not holding you back. Well, the big eye opener when this whole medication thing happened, and he was on the steroid. And I remember after the miscarriage, we went on a trip just to reconnect, and we went to the Bahamas. Found some like Groupon trip, and we go to the Bahamas. They lose our luggage, and of course, he has his like steroid medication in the luggage. Which, by the way, don't travel with your medication in your luggage. So it was like eye-opening because we get there, and he had only been. It was like a day and a half without the steroid, and he could not walk. He could
Oh,
not
wow.
walk. He was like laid up in the bed like all day, and we're at this beautiful resort. It was all inclusive. Like, I'm like, what is going on? It was this huge eye opener of like, he can't walk without this
Wow.
medication. And that actually, I'm so glad that we experienced that, because we came back from that saying he can no longer be on this medication. It's masking something very serious. And that's when we had a whole body scan, and they were like, whoa, he is bone on bone. And when he goes off this medication, I don't know if he's going to be able to walk again. And I'm like,
Wow.
we're newlyweds. We're trying to focus on fertility and having a baby. And now my husband can't walk like for the rest of his life. Like, what is happening right now? So, long story short, he's had double hip replacements, double knee replacements. We're looking at potential foot surgeries. He's had to reteach himself how to play piano because he's a piano player, and his hands, like basically a normal hand, it goes straight out, but at each joint they go like another 45-degree angle. Like, it's crazy. So his hands like go out like this, and he has to like readjust in his mind where the keys are and everything. So anyways, he has regained his ability to do all of the things that he loves. And by seeing him do that and working with him and helping with him, I can't possibly take my mobility and my health for granted. I did before meeting him. Opening a jar, no problem. Going on a run, no big deal. Don't think twice about it. And now, like on my runs, I was like, I think about this all the time. Like, Pete probably wishes that he could be doing this with me right now, but we're thankful that he can be out in the yard playing with the kids. Like, we're just going to be thankful for the mobility that we all have. But I don't see working out or anything like that as I have to. I see it as I get to, and that I need to be able to maintain my one body that I'm given. And I want to be here as long as possible for my kids and my family, and to experience all that life has to offer. Like, anybody that knows me knows that like I just want to be a sponge to all the things in life. Like, I just want to do all the things, and I see health and longevity and quality of life as a part of that sponge. To be able, you can't experience all that life has for you for as long as you want to without your health. And that's the way I feel. I don't preach that on other people. I don't push products or, things on other people. I share what I do and what works for me. Some of the things that work for me, because especially as an entrepreneur, time is money, and it's tough to say like, oh, okay, I'm going to dedicate this time that's going to take me away from clients, aka revenue. It's tough to be able to like shut that off when you don't have a boss who's like, you sit in this chair for this amount of time. Like, you don't have that. So it can either, some people, they have an issue with like, I'm going to do laundry and this, and like, they can't, like, I have the other issue where I will work myself into a rut. And so I like to just to be able to make sure that I am on my own calendar. I have a personal trainer that I meet with virtually. So it's on the calendar, and I'm meeting with an actual person who is helping me stay accountable. It's not like a neighbor, running friend who I can cancel on or whatever. It's like, nope, this is on the schedule. This is and we're working toward a plan too. I always like to work toward a plan. So we sign up for a race and there's a plan. I know that like today's a strength day, tomorrow's going to be cardio. And like, I love having structure and plan and working toward a goal. So those are things that I've noticed about myself, that I like to have that kind of like structure and purpose. And I also need the accountability, because otherwise I'll just be like, oh, I can cancel. Oh, I don't need to do
Yeah.
that. And then you aren't making yourself a priority. And so those are some of the things that work for me, but it's really STEM. I've always been a runner or, enjoyed physical activity, but I didn't realize how important your health is until the struggles that we went through with Pete and his mobility.
Yeah. Before we got on this call today, I was working on a program that I'm giving to a group of women next month in Tennessee. And they asked me if I would talk about grief. And the woman who's playing the event said, I'd like to talk about grief because I don't think grief is just about death. I think there's grief that happens throughout our life. And how do we navigate that? And so I've been working on this message. You're giving me notes because I've been working on this message to say, well, there is grief. It happens all throughout our life. You were experiencing grief as a young wife, caregiver. Idea of what you had envisioned for your future was changing. But I'm sharing with them too that I think that we should make more space, or maybe be more forgiving of ourselves to allow grief and joy to live alongside each other.
Yeah.
Having joy isn't a betrayal to grief. Having grief means that we are in love with something, with someone, right? I mean, that all goes together. So tell me, so you've gone through heartache, but now you have 3 children. You have all that work. So tell me about being a mom. Tell me about being a mom. Tell me this season of your life.
Oh gosh. Well, I think that it's one of my greatest joys, that you're talking about grief before that. And I really see that the grief, I did grieve the life that I thought. I think the grief is like love that of something that you had or thought you had. And it's like something that you haven't figured out, like something like you have, but you haven't found like a shelf to put it on, or, it's just sort of floating, and you kind of hold it until you have a place for it. And I held that grief for so long because, again, I had this idea of newlyweds, we're going to travel, we're going to do this and that. And then when we decide to have kids, boom, family time. And it just didn't work out that way. And I held a lot of grief for who my husband was, and the transition to who he is now. And again, I held that until I was able to put that on a shelf and say, like, this is who he is now. And there's differences with that. Like, yes, I will not have a running partner in my husband. That's okay. But I did grieve that a little bit. But I replaced it with a lot of joy, because I spent a lot of time focusing on that joy and the hope of, like, okay, I hope he can regain his strength. And then when I have that, and I really focus on that as like, that's something to truly be joyful. When I see that, I am going to sit with it for a little bit, because I didn't think that would be possible. There was a day I remember sitting in a bathtub, just like we had gone through the loss, like I was dealing with just all of this that I just was, I call it my bathtub moment, because I just felt so lost, and like I just was, I wanted so bad, and I had to have the miscarriage, to realize that I wanted to be a mom so bad. Pete is about 10 years older than me, and he was a lot more ready to have kids than me. Um, and so I, I thought about that whole situation, and I thought, I'm actually, in a weird way, I know that that had to happen that way. I am a different mom because of that loss. If that loss hadn't have happened, I wouldn't have had that bathtub moment where I just realized that I so viscerally wanted to be a mom. I wanted it more than anything. And I did not fully feel that before the loss. And so I think that when you have that grief, and again, it's not always a bad thing, like figure out, okay, this is the thing I'm holding, and how do I get to that other side? How do I find a perfect spot for it? And sometimes you take it off that shelf again and you hold it again. Maybe that's not the perfect spot for it anymore. And so, I think back to those moments of grief and sorrow, and I actually am thankful for it, because when the kids are acting up or they're being crazy, and moments that would like send me over the edge otherwise, I think like I prayed for this. I had my bathtub moment for this. Oh my gosh, I still wanted this. I asked for it. I prayed for it. Now it's here. And so I think that I am a completely different mom now. And probably we have more kids than I ever would have thought I would ever want because of that. But it just, it's one of my greatest joys, and I hate to say like accomplishments, but because of we didn't give up on wanting that for us, and we knew that that was for us, and we figured out a way to make that happen. And actually through advancements through biologics, and one of the reasons we're really involved with like the Arthritis Foundation, because of the research that happened after those years that we were off medicine. We went through IVF for Lola, our oldest, but there was a new medication that did not have side effects for fertility that he went on. So he was able to make his body feel better, and we didn't have to worry about side effects. And so we actually naturally had number 2 and number 3. And so that's pretty exciting. I also attribute that to the Fertility Foods book, and just naturally, what ways other than medicate this and medicate that, like what can you do naturally? And part of that was a healthy life, healthy diet, healthy mind, and it all plays into it. But yes, I'm a mom of 3, and I mean 4 if you count Pete, my husband, 5 if you count the dog. But it's pretty crazy. But I had my bathtub moment praying for it, so now it's here.
I love it. When you look back over this whole journey, and that young woman driving to Philadelphia, coming all the way to today, what surprises you the most about where you are today? Any of it?
I think that the fact that I have 3 kids is surprising. I think anybody who knew me like in college or anything, I was always very, very career focused. I don't know why, but I thought I was going to be like the next Anna Wintour, some editor of a magazine, New York City. Like that's the way I envisioned myself. And then it was a big surprise when I moved up to Philadelphia, and living in a big city and working for a big publishing company. It wasn't all it was cracked up to be. And I am so glad that I did that, and it demystified what I thought was a dream. And I'm like, you know what? This isn't that great. I'm here with people who are just so cutthroat. They don't care about. I remember I had a flat tire, and I had like 2 friends that I worked with. None of them, neither were able to like help me, nor probably wanted to, inconvenience themselves to like help me. And I don't know why I didn't think about AAA, but I remember, I think maybe that's what I ended up doing. But I remember like, oh my gosh, my fiance is 9 hours away. I have a million people that I could call in Cincinnati. And I just realized like, that's what matters to me. That's what matters to me. People, being around people that actually care. None of this stuff matters. Career, like I can have a great career, not in a big city. Like this is not an ingredient for success. And that's when I started to think about what's going to get me back to Cincinnati. And I had those long drives back and forth of like, okay, well, if I started it for somebody else, because you have the little devil on your shoulder that is like, you're too young, you don't have enough capital. And I'm like, well, I wasn't young enough for this publishing company to start their online only publication. I know what capital they were working with, and it wasn't much. So I'm like, just checking off all of these things that were barriers, and got to Cincinnati, and I'm like, Pete, I've got an idea. And he's like, whoa, what's happening? What did you do on this drive? But I would say the most surprising thing is that I am much more of a family person than I ever envisioned myself being. I always saw myself as a career. I might be a career woman. I might be a great auntie one day. Like, never really like envisioned myself as being this all-in mom that I am now. And I think a big thing that I realized is that you don't have to choose one or the other. And I started to see some of these women that I was writing about with Cincy Chic. I was so amazed because when you're writing a story about people, a lot of times you're sitting with them and they're in their messy middle. Like, they're like, okay, you can come by before the store opens. I'm going to have my son with me. Like, the babysitter canceled, blah, blah, blah. Like, and you just see the behind the scenes, or you're with someone before they launch something and they're in the chaos of all of that. And a lot of times, especially with women, they're just real with you when it's like, I feel like business owners, like when they're launching something, they're excited, and I like to feel like fast friends with people, and that maybe helps people open up a little bit. But I just was so inspired by these women I was writing about, because I was like, they're not choosing career or a family. They're doing it simultaneously. And I realized that for myself, that I didn't have to choose one or the other. And so when we did decide that we were going to start to try and have a family, I warmed up to the idea. Like I said, Pete was a little bit more ahead of me with that. And then after the loss, that was a big aha moment for me, where I was like, oh my gosh. And those weeks that I was pregnant, I was mentally preparing myself of like, okay, this is what this is the path I'm on. And I was mentally preparing myself for that. And as scared as I was much more along on that path than I realized I was. So when I was abruptly taken off of that path, I realized how much I wanted to be back on it, and how much I wanted to get to that horizon I was walking toward. And so I think once you've experienced something like that, you're forever changed. So looking back on that girl that was driving back and forth to Philadelphia and back, the biggest thing is that I am much more of a family person than I ever envisioned myself to be, and I did not have to sacrifice my career for it.
Oh, that's great. That's great. What haven't I asked you or made space for today that just feels important to you on your heart or in your message that you'd want to share with other people?
I think I'd like to share a little bit about, I think that everyone is here with a purpose, and the things that happen to us, there's some sort of purpose with that, whether it's to teach a lesson, whether it's to help someone else with it. One of the things that Pete and I have turned our story into something that we can help others with, we realized some real gaps in our experience with dealing with chronic illness and fertility, and how interrelated they are. And we also saw where some of what happened to us could have been prevented. So when he went on this drug therapy that was working really, really well for him at the time, prior to going on this drug, it's a chronic illness, chronic, AKA gonna have it for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Before he went on these medications that have fertility side effects, he was not told about or offered any fertility preservation options. That's a big problem, because all of this could have been avoided had he preserved his fertility. It's so easy for guys. Like, take an hour, see me this afternoon. Like, for women, it's a little bit more complicated. I get that. But he was not told about his fertility preservation options before starting this lifelong drug therapy. And then we realized that so many people that have chronic illness, whether it's related to the drugs that they're on or it's the inflammation itself, they have fertility issues. A lot of people aren't connecting one or the other. Everything in medicine is so siloed off. So we started PS Never Give Up, a foundation, a 501c3 that helps those with chronic illness who are seeking fertility preservation and resources, because sometimes you just need to be educated about what your fertility preservation options are so that you preserve that before you start this lifelong drug therapy and avoid all of the things, the permanent damage that Pete had to go through and all the reparations that we had to do after that. So that is the one part of it. And then the other part of it is, okay, now you've realized you do need fertility assistance, whether that's IVF, egg preservation, all of that is super expensive. And a lot of times it's out of pocket. How do you pay for it? So that's what our foundation does. It raises funds to not only connect with like Children's Hospital and make sure that anyone who's going to be diagnosed, that is being diagnosed and about to start a drug therapy, let them know about their fertility preservation options. That is so key. And we share our stories saying this is an example of what happens when that doesn't happen. So the resources, and then IVF grants is where we're starting, but eventually we want to go into grants for egg preservation, because that is not only the retrieval of the eggs, but then it's keeping them on ice until you're ready to use them. And going through that process. Also, we want to move into helping with adoption. Sometimes having a pregnancy yourself is not an option for you, but you still want to have a family, and there's still a lot of costs associated with that. So that's really the vision that we have for PS Never Give Up Foundation. And you can go to psnevergiveup.org and learn a little bit more about that. And it's funny because Pete has a podcast, and he started it during COVID to focus on positivity. He interviews people about their never give up moments. And he would always end it with PS Never Give Up, like postscript, like, wrapping it up, end of the. And then one day he was signing his initials, Pete Scalia. And I'm like, Pete, PS. That's your initials. That's your name. And so I was like, being the branding girl, I'm like, I see a logo. Let's put it on everything. Let's have an online shop. So we have an online shop on psnevergiveup.com, and that's the for-profit side. And so that's where his podcast is. That's where the online shop is. And then a portion of all of that goes to the foundation, and it kind of funds that part of it. We're also working on fundraising events and things like that for the foundation that'll help to support the grants and the work that we're doing there. But I do want to share that because I feel like, not that I ever want to put a pretty bow on anything, but I do believe that it's important to find a purpose through the pain or after the pain or from the pain. It helps you to resolve some of these things instead of just circling around it like, why me, why me, why me? It turns into, that's why. That's why.
Yeah.
And you all of a sudden feel this affinity in a weird way. Like it might be the worst thing that ever happened to you, or the thing you like the least about yourself, or, and then all of a sudden it's like, I am thankful for that thing. I am thankful because it got me here. I am thankful because now I can connect with so many people I would have never had the opportunity to do that with. I am thankful for the life that it has now put me on this path. And it completely puts you on a different, like a mindset path. It's just, that's what we've done with it. And I feel like we would feel a lot differently with what's happened with Pete if we hadn't had done that. What has happened with our fertility, like obviously we were able to start a family, but I still feel like I don't have a place to put this thing, and like what happened with us. And now it helps me to put it on the shelf, and because we've created something that I feel like, okay, we saw disconnects, we experienced gaps in the system, and we're doing what we can to make sure that doesn't happen to other people. And that feels very purposeful to me.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that's that courageous choice that you are making to choose hope, to choose joy. Yeah.
Yep.
Gosh, thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Amy,
Thanks
for
for
being so
talking about
open
it.
with this
I could talk all
story.
day
Yeah.
about it if you couldn't tell.
It's a wonderful story. I'm just so grateful that you shared it with me. And yeah, I just love the work that you're doing and the message that you share. Tell me, where can everyone find you? How can they connect with you?
Well, I do a lot online. I'm very active, like with Instagram. I love sharing stories. Those are really fun. So I update my stories a lot on Instagram. I'm Amy, AMY_Scalia, SCALIA. So I share a lot there, and it's just real life. Like sometimes it's family stuff, sometimes it's work stuff. The business that I started, my marketing firm, it's called Local Creator Studio. You can find me there. All of the projects that we work on, a lot of the projects that we work on are there. We do a lot of like content creation, social media management, event assistance, and also just kind of like consulting through whatever it might be, like making dreams into reality, like what's happening right here in front of me, which is so exciting. But I see a lot of purpose. I feel a lot of purpose in that because it's one of my proudest moments. And I say that like proud feels weird. Because you and I met when I was in a really, really messy middle. And I was holding that container. I was like, what do I do with this? It was just so fresh. Because I had realized I needed to be an entrepreneur again, and I wanted to start my marketing agency. And but the path had not really like presented itself all the way yet. It felt so new. I knew that it's what I needed to do. But it felt very scary because there wasn't anyone doing exactly what I wanted to do or felt called to do. And when you don't have an example to follow, that's really scary. And so I say that I'm proud because I believed in myself and I believed in what I'm doing and what I could create. And I really feel proud of the work that I'm doing for those I'm doing it for.
So I'm going to make sure that there's a link to all of these things in the show notes. PS never gives up. Well, all the places to find you, all of the work that you're doing. And I hope people will come check it out. Yes.
Yeah. It's all on there. There's a website for PS Never Give Up, the foundation, Local Creator Studio. I have my own. So feel free to reach out too. I know we talked about a lot of different things, but I am an open book and always willing to share my experience, offer any help or assistance with any of the things that you think I might be able to help out with. I love being able to share and help other, I feel like that rise while lifting others is a real thing. So please feel free to connect if there's anything that spoke to you about what we talked about today.
Thank you for being here. Thank you so much, Amy. Thank you for listening to this episode of Compass Stories. I'm your host, Veronica Sterling. And if you've enjoyed this, please subscribe to hear more and share it with others. Thank you for doing so. That's really helpful for me. To learn more about my message and connect, you can find me at www.veronicasterling.com.